Jeff Goldblum in a starring role in a dark comedy series? Yes, please. KAOS is a modern presentation of Greek mythology, and Goldblum is at the head of the table as Zeus. So are you going to want to dive into this mythos? Zeus has long enjoyed his status as king of the gods. That is, until he wakes up one morning and discovers a wrinkle on his forehead. Neurosis sets in, setting him off on a dangerous, paranoid path. As Zeus becomes convinced his fall is coming, he starts to see signs of it everywhere. So in addition to Goldblum, this stars Janet McTeer, Aurora Perrineau, Stephen Dillane, Nabhaan Rizwan, Cliff Curtis, Killian Scott, Misia Butler, plus Leila Farzad, Billie Piper, David Thewlis, and Debi Mazar. Now, this is a British production, but I love that all of the actors retain their natural accents. None of them are attempting to create some faux Greek accent, or then come up with something that would match what the Greek gods could be assumed to sound like. And while I see how this can be off-putting to some because the consistency of accents is going to be all over the place, at least we don't have wonky and terrible accents being attempted. Now for me, that worked. The season is 8 episodes that are each about an hour, so it is quite a chunk to binge. And let me just get this out of the way up front, even though I do hope that you're going to stick around for the full review. The show doesn't really find its footing until about episode 5. Before that is a lot of character introduction and story setup, so it's a lot to ask. The final 4 episodes have wonderful momentum and intrigue, until we get to the finale, and then we're left with everything unresolved and at a cliffhanger. And this is where I think the show is just going to strike itself with a massive lightning bolt. We all know Netflix has the propensity and track record of canceling shows after a single season, leaving us as the audience just standing there waiting for our story to be resolved. And that then makes us gun-shy to invest time into new series, which then only satisfies the streamer's own prophecy that the show isn't doing well, so they cancel. Where if they had just had the confidence to allow the show to find its audience, gain a following, and then deliver a second season within a year or so, they'd see that they don't need to cancel so many, and in fact, could really retain their subscribers. Okay, rant's over. Now, the story's simple, but also very layered. Because there are a lot of characters to introduce and several moving parts to the narrative, this takes time to get everything to just gel appropriately. Now, Goldblum as Zeus, he's acerbic and exactly what you'd expect. He's characteristically snarky with a slight stutter as he searches for just the right word to eviscerate somebody. Now, I love how clearly he embodies the hubris of the god, making him entertaining to watch, but also stomach-turning to endure. And Goldblum isn't really stretching his acting abilities in this, but I went in expecting to get Jeff Goldblum. That's what we get. At the core of the story, it's sort of a life crisis that Zeus is facing. So we get to see how a repeated prophecy is interpreted by all those that come in contact with it, and then how they choose to react. Now, the level of complications, it's engaging and ultimately clever, allowing for many twists and potentially unexpected outcomes. Now, if you're familiar with Greek mythology, and I'm no expert, I don't think everything is going to be accurate to a T, but the characters, they all contain at least small characteristics of the gods and demigods that they portray. Most of them, they also grew on me in large ways, thanks mostly to demonstrated wonderful growth. Now, I think this was more evident within the demigods than the gods of Olympus because they were usually just more concerned with themselves and ruling the humans than really actually anything else going on with the humans who were worshipping them. And in this aspect, there's also a lot of satire that comes into play. The show is pretty pointedly creating social commentary on religion as a whole, and then the zealotry that sometimes takes hold. We get to watch how fanatical people can become. Not only those in support of the gods, but those who oppose their rule. And this also serves as a commentary on government, highlighting oppression and abuse coming from those on high, be those god or man appointed. Now, the set designs, they are phenomenal. It's got a mainly European aesthetic, utilizing a lot of beautiful frescoes and spacious environments, whether those be palaces, city squares, or just the gardens of the gods. Now, the visual aesthetic of the show, it's also creative. The colors on Earth are slightly drab and mildly depressed, while in stark contrast, the colors on Mount Olympus are vibrant and bold. And then when we're taken to Hades, everything is desaturated, devoid of color to create a lonely, monotone, and mundane existence. And with the presentation of the entire show, it really gave me vibes of Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet. It's modern with this certain romantic or older flair to it. The titles that pop up on screen, they also brought to mind Luhrmann's movie. They're bold, abrupt, enhanced by musical stings to then accentuate their introduction onto the screen. Now, I'm a fan of Romeo and Juliet, so I appreciated these touches. If you're not a fan of that movie, you might just find them unimaginative or even intrusive. Now, I've mentioned already that the first half of the season is a bit much, and it takes a while to find its pacing. In addition to the large amount of characters, we're also being tossed around to many different locations, sometimes only for a few minutes before we're then thrown someplace else to meet or follow other characters. And I get why the show did this. I mean, it allows us to get a broad picture of what's going on to transpire then before it begins to narrow down to the crux of the story when everything begins to collide. But from an investment standpoint, I think the narrative might have gelled faster if we just spent a large hunk of time with one portion of the story and then moved on, finally bringing all the pieces together. Now, this could feel more cohesive and less scattered or frenetic, but it could also make the story drag. So despite taking quite a while to get to a focal point, it might actually end up being the better way just to accomplish it. I just know that 4-ish hours is a lot to ask for an audience to stick with something just simply in the hopes that it might get good. Now, one of the standouts for me in this series is Aurora Perrineau. And if her last name sounds mildly familiar, it's because she's the daughter of Harold Perrineau, who you'd recognize from Lost or the equally weird show From. Now, Aurora plays Riddy, and she becomes one of the pivotal figures within the narrative. Perrineau convincingly conveys confusion, disdain, longing, and resolve, giving her character endearing strength. Now, another standout for me was Cliff Curtis playing Poseidon. I loved the bewilderment that he sometimes had, especially when having to placate Zeus. I mean, Zeus would act like some tantruming child, and then Poseidon had to be supportive for fear of getting a lightning strike through his bumhole. Now, the series balances dark humor with engaging drama and mystery, all while delivering a poignant and relevant social commentary. The cast is deep with talent, each creating nuanced personas that elicit the visceral responses to make them memorable. The story, unfortunately, takes entirely too long to establish and find focus, and then frustratingly doesn't leave the audience with any resolutions, other than to hope the series isn't canceled by the streamer before answers are given. Jeff Goldblum delivers a performance that is exactly as expected. Whether that's lazy or genius will be up for interpretation, but one thing is for sure, he nails the self-important hubristic nature of the king of the gods. Chaos does indeed reign. It just takes its time to do so. There is sex, nudity, a ton of profanity, and a bunch of violence. I give season 1 of KAOS 3.5 out of 5 couches. I want to give this more, but I'm really fearful that it's never going to see a second season. All right, do you happen to have a favorite person or entity from Greek mythology? Who do you hope is going to be included in this story? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.